The first thing you feel as a 1910s Utrecht Peat Bagger is the damp wood of the punt beneath your boots, while the black water waits beside you. Let your shoulders loosen, and let the slow work set the pace. We are out beyond the city of Utrecht now, where the low peatlands lie open under a pale morning sky, and the air smells of reed, wet earth, and last night's smoke from the little stoves along the canal. The work is yours tonight, though we take it gently, as if the day has been set down in your hands without hurry. You stand in the narrow boat with a long dredging pole, a worn handle, and the quiet knowledge that the ground beneath this water is not really ground at all. It is old moss, old sedge, old plant matter pressed by centuries into a dark fuel that people in Utrecht still burn for heat, for cooking, and for the steady comfort of flame. In the 1910s, the Utrecht Peat Bagger works where land and water have been arguing for generations. Around Vinkeveen, Loosdrecht, Maasseveen, and the wet country of the Vecht, peat cutting has left long strips of working land beside channels and pools. The old names sit softly in the mouth, like places remembered at dusk. Trechgaten, the dredged-out cuts. Legakkers, the narrow drying fields. Turf, the finished blocks, stacked and hardened by air. Your hands know these words before your mind wakes fully. The pole tells you where the bottom lies. The boat shifts when you lean. The morning is cool enough to make the sleeves of your shirt feel stiff at the wrist, and when you draw in a breath, you can taste the water before you taste your breakfast. Somewhere behind you, a church bell marks the hour in a town that still feels half asleep, and the sound travels flat and soft across the marsh. You begin by setting your boots carefully. The punt is narrow, and a peat boat has no patience for clumsy weight. A little water lies in the bottom, shining between scraps of straw, mud, and old rope. You nudge the boat along with the pole, past reeds that whisper against the side, and we stay close enough to hear the creak of the oarlock from another man working farther down the cut. There is no grand beginning to this work. There is only the first reach, the first pull, and the first dark load rising from below. You lower the baggerburgle, the dredging scoop on its long wooden handle, through the brown surface. The ring and net bite into the peat beneath the water. You feel resistance travel up through the pull, first as a tremor, then as weight. You pull slowly, because wet peat does not come willingly. It clings and stretches. It has the cold patience of something that has spent thousands of years becoming useful. The scoop breaks the surface with a soft suck, and the black mass slides against the rim, heavy with water, roots, grit, and the smell of a deep sour earth that has never seen daylight. Now the hard part begins, though we do not need to call it harshly. You turn your shoulders and bring the wet peat over the side, letting it fall into the boat with a low slap. The punt dips. A thin wave taps the bank. You pause for breath, not because the work has defeated you, but because the rhythm asks for it. Every trade has a rhythm that protects the body when pride would hurry it. A Utrecht Peat Bagger in the 1910s is paid by output, or by a day's expectation that everyone understands without saying much. The peat has to be brought up, drained, spread, cut, turned, dried, and loaded before it becomes money. Rain can undo the neatest field. A late frost can stiffen the fingers. Too much sun can crack the surface before the inside is ready. The sky is always one of your tools, even when it does nothing but hang there. Your coat hangs from a peg or a low willow branch, already smelling of smoke, marsh, and old wool. Under it your shirt warms as you work, then cools whenever the breeze comes down the channel. The long pole wears at the palms, and old men wrap cloth around the grip, not for comfort exactly, but because the skin has its limits. You learn this without complaint. You learn it the way water learns a ditch. The first hour is almost silent. You lower the scoop, dig, lift, twist, and empty. Lower, dig, lift, twist, and empty. The wet peat gathers in the bottom of the boat, a dark heap with a faint sheen on it, and little bubbles break where trapped air escapes from the old plant fibers. When you step back, the boat answers with a mild roll, and your knees adjust before you think. We can stay here with the movement for a while. It is simple enough to follow with closed eyes. The scoop goes down, the pole leans, your back takes the load, your shoulders guide it, and your boots hold the narrow boards. There is the sound of dripping from the net, the soft knock of wood against wood, and the distant calling of someone moving another boat along the water. The place itself has been shaped by work like yours. Long before the 1910s, people around Utrecht and the Vecht dug peat because trees were scarce and fuel mattered. They cut the higher peat by hand, where land allowed it. Later, when water filled the cuts and the useful peat lay below the surface, they dredged it up wet, spread it, pressed it, and made fuel from mud. That is the patient cleverness of the Low Countries. Even soaked ground can warm a room. You know the signs of good peat by touch. Some comes up too loose, with too much watery sludge in it. Some holds together in fibrous clumps, dark and stringy. There may be bits of reed root, pale strands, and the remains of plants that grew when the old marsh was quiet. You do not think of them as ancient, not while your hands are wet and your sleeves are pulling at your wrists. You think of whether it will dry cleanly. The work is hard because everything is heavy before it becomes light. A dry turf block can be held in one hand, almost like a piece of bread from the earth. Wet peat is another matter. It drags at the pole, slumps in the boat, and seeps into every seam it can find. Your body has to move it while it is still waterlogged, before the wind and sun take their share. By mid-morning, the first load is ready to be pushed toward the legaca, and the work changes without becoming quicker. The drying field lies narrow and low, bordered by water on both sides, a strip of dark land made useful by care. It is not wide enough for wasteful footsteps. You guide the punt close, and the bank gives off a smell of crushed grass, wet clay, and old peat warming under the first real light of day. Here the Utrecht Peat Bagger becomes part boatman, part labourer, part gardener of fuel. You unload the black mass onto the field with a shovel, a fork, or by tipping and scraping it where the bank allows. The peat lands with a thick sound, wetter than soil and duller than mud. It spreads at the edges. Your boots sink a little when you step onto the field, and cold water presses up around the soles. We take the movement slowly. Scoop, lift, swing, drop. The shovel handle is smooth where many hands have polished it. The iron edge has been sharpened, bent, and straightened more than once. Each load has to be spread into an even bed, because drying is a quiet bargain with air. Too thick, and the inside stays wet. Too thin, and the peat breaks apart before it can be cut. You use a rake or a wooden board to level the black surface. Sometimes workers trod the wet peat with bare feet or heavy wooden tools, pressing it into a smoother mat. In colder months, you may keep your boots on and work with the tools instead, feeling the suction each time you shift your weight. The peat is slick, and it shines like dark dough. It smells close and mineral, with a green edge from the reeds. Nearby, another boat knocks gently against a post. A woman on the bank may be carrying a pail, or a boy may be sent with bread wrapped in cloth. Work in the peat districts often belonged to whole households, because the drying, turning, stacking, and watching did not fit neatly inside one pair of hands. Even when the main pull from the water is yours, the finished turf carries the touch of many quiet mornings. In the 1910s, the world beyond the Utrecht marshes is changing. Coal comes by rail and canal, gas lights many streets. Factories and houses no longer depend only on peat the way they once did. Yet peat still has its customers, especially where habit, price, and local trade keep the old fuel moving. A baker may know its heat, a household may trust its steady burn. A gardener may value peat in another form, as bedding, packing, or soil. None of that feels distant when you are standing on the Legica with mud on your trousers. Markets are spoken of in town offices and warehouses, but here they arrive as orders, prices, and the number of turves a season can give. The canal is the road. The boat is the cart. The drying field is the workshop. Your measuring tools are the hand, the eye, the weather, and the long experience of people who know wet ground. You pause at the edge and look back over the water. The channel is dark where the scoop has disturbed it, and small rings widen across the surface. Reeds bend in the breeze with a dry whisper. Beyond them, low roofs and thin chimneys mark the human world, though the marsh seems older than all of it. We can feel how a job like this keeps you between two times, the ancient peat below and the modern city waiting for fuel. The morning continues, and with it comes the careful work of shaping what the water has given up. The spread peat must settle until it can be cut, but not every field is at the same stage. On one strip, yesterday's layer is still soft under the crust. On another, the surface has tightened enough for marking. You walk along the ridges with the quiet attention of someone reading a page written in moisture. The Utrecht Peat Bagger is not only a person who digs. You learn drying by sight and sound. A wet mat takes the print of your boot with a sucking sigh. A better one holds a shallow mark, dark at the edge and dull on top. When the sun has worked on it, the surface changes from glossy black to brown black, then to a lighter, fibrous face that can be cut into blocks. The tool for cutting may be a spade, a turf knife, or a simple blade made for straight, repeated lines. You mark the peat in rows, pressing down with steady care. The cuts must be close enough for useful fuel, but not so small that the blocks crumble. Each line is a promise to the drying wind. Each square or brick-like shape has to be lifted later, turned, stood, and stacked. Your hands are never completely clean during this part of the day. Peat gets under the nails and settles in the creases. It dries in patches on the wrist, tightening the skin. When you wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, you leave a faint mark there, and no one bothers to mention it. Everyone here is marked by the same material. It is almost a badge, but too ordinary to be called one. We can imagine the small breakfast now, taken without ceremony. Bread, perhaps rye or coarse wheat, with cheese if the week has allowed it, or a smear of fat, or a little smoked meat on better days. Coffee may be weak and warm from a flask or tin, and it tastes faintly of metal. You sit on an upturned crate or the edge of the boat, feeling the damp come through if you stay too long. The sky brightens over the Utrecht lowlands, and the water begins to show color. Not blue exactly, more like pewter with brown underneath. A heron moves away on long wings, slow enough that it seems not to hurry but simply to choose another place. The boat rope creaks against its post. Somewhere across the field, a shovel rings lightly against a hidden stone or old bit of wood in the peat. It is hard to be a peat bagger because the day is made of small strains repeated until they become large. No single lift looks like much from a distance. A man in a boat, a pole, a dark heap, a strip of drying land. But the body counts differently. The palms remember the handle. The lower back remembers the turn. The shoulders remember each wet scoop long after the water has stopped dripping. And yet there is a calm knowledge inside the repetition. By now, your hands understand things that would take too long to explain. You know when the scoop is too full. You know when the boat has taken enough weight. You know how far to lean before balance becomes pride. This is not heroic knowledge. It is the kind that keeps bread on a table and warmth in a room, and that may be the truest kind. As the sun lifts higher over the reed beds, we move from the first heavy dredging into the longer patience of the drying field. The peat you raised earlier is already losing a little of its shine. Water gathers in shallow channels, then slips away or sinks down. You make small adjustments with the rake, drawing ridges straight, smoothing low places, and opening the surface so the air can reach it. On a good drying day, the wind matters as much as the sun. It moves over the legaca with a cool hand, lifting moisture grain by grain. You feel it on your cheeks and in the damp cloth at your collar. If the wind comes steady from the open water, the peat firms faster. If the air turns still and heavy, the whole field seems to hold its breath, and the work waits with it. There are old rules for weather, though they are not written down in any book you carry. Redness in the morning may make someone glance twice at the sky. A low haze over the water can mean a damp day. The smell of rain sometimes arrives before the cloud that brings it. A Utrecht Peat Bagger learns to mistrust a beautiful morning if the air feels wrong under the tongue. Still, the day gives what it gives. You bend and check the edges of yesterday's cut blocks. Some can be loosened, some must remain. You slide a tool beneath one turf and feel whether it holds. If it bends like cake, it is too wet. If it lifts with a slight crumble at the corner, it may be ready to turn. The difference is small, but the season depends on small differences. Turning turf is quieter than dredging, though it wears the body in another way. You stoop, lift, rotate, and set each block on a drier side. The peat is lighter now, but there are many pieces, and they ask for the same careful motion again and again. Your fingers feel the roughening surface, the fibrous edges, the damp heart that still hides within. The smell is softer than fresh bagger, more earthy, less sour. We stay with this work because it is the heart of the process. Peat is not made by the scoop alone. It is made by waiting correctly. It is made by touching a block at the right time, by turning it before mold and rot take hold, by stacking it only when the wind has done enough. The job is hard because the worker cannot command the day. You can only meet it. Across the field, the rows begin to look orderly. Dark oblongs lie in repeating lines, like a quiet script written on the land. When the blocks stand on edge, they cast little shadows. When they are gathered into small stacks, air passes between them. Later, larger clamps or piles may rise, built so rain runs away and the wind can still find a path through the fuel. In Utrecht and the nearby peat villages, a good stack is a practical art. Too tight, and the middle stays damp. Too loose, and the pile may slump or shed pieces into the mud. You place each turf with the worn patience of someone setting bricks. But these bricks came from water and plants, not clay and kiln fire. They are lighter in the hand as they dry, and their sound changes too. Fresh peat lands with a soft thud. Drier turf knocks lightly against another piece. It is a small sound, but after years in the work it tells you something. The ear becomes another tool. The nose does as well. The eye follows color, crack, edge, and shadow. Work like this teaches the whole body to notice, because missing the small signs costs time. By midday, the Utrecht peat fields have warmed, and the work settles into a slower, broader rhythm. Your sleeves are rolled, your hands are blackened, and the boat lies lower when loaded, higher when emptied. The narrow channels reflect the sky in broken pieces. Gnats gather where the air is still. Reed stems tap against each other with a dry clicking sound, and far off, a dog barks from a farmyard. The meal break comes because bodies need it, not because the marsh has stopped asking. You sit where the ground is least wet, perhaps on boards laid along the bank, perhaps on the edge of the punt with your boots braced apart. Bread tastes better outdoors, even when it is plain. Cheese sweats a little in the wrapping. Coffee or tea warms the mouth, and for a few minutes the hands rest open on the knees. We do not need to make much talk here. Some workers speak about the price of turf, the last rain, a neighbor's illness, or whether the canal boat came late. Others simply eat. The marsh fills the spaces between words. Water laps. A fly worries at the rim of a cup. The sun touches the back of your neck, and the wet cuffs of your trousers begin to stiffen as the peat dries on them. Being a peat bagger in the 1910s means living with a kind of uncertainty that never announces itself loudly. A fine week can save a season. A run of rain can spoil careful work. Prices may fall when coal is cheap or when a buyer has better terms elsewhere. The labor is old, but the world around it is not still. Even here, among reeds and slow boats, change travels along the water. You may have seen new materials, new fuels, and new habits entering the city. Utrecht has tram lines, shops, factories, university rooms, and houses where the day is measured by clocks rather than weather. Yet someone still wants turf stacked near a shed, or sold from a yard, or carried by barge toward a market. Your work belongs to both the old marsh and the modern town, which is why it feels simple and complicated at once. After the meal, the body is slower to rise. The back complains in a plain, familiar way. The hands close around the tool again, and the first lift after resting feels heavier than it should. Then the rhythm returns. It always does. The pole lowers into the cut. The shovel slices the dark heap. The rake draws the wet surface smooth, and the day resumes as if it had only paused to breathe. The afternoon task may be loading partly dried turf from a stack nearer the canal. These blocks are far easier to carry than fresh peat, but their number makes them weighty in time. You lift them into a basket, barrow, sled, or boat, depending on the ground and distance. The surfaces rub against your palms, leaving dry brown dust over the older black stains. The smell is warmer now, like earth kept near a stove. A boat loaded with turf has its own balance. You stack the blocks so the weight sits low and even. Too much to one side, and the punt lists. Too high, and the load catches the wind. You have learned to build the cargo in neat courses, leaving room to stand and move the pole. The canal may look gentle, but water notices carelessness, especially in a narrow craft. We push away from the bank and feel the load settle. The pole meets the bottom with a dull touch. You lean forward, press, and the boat glides a few feet, then slows. Press again, glide again. The motion is not fast, but it is steady, and steady is often enough. The water opens around the bow in a dark V, and little pieces of reed drift aside. The route through the peat country can be as familiar as a hallway, a bend by the willow, a post leaning near the bank, a place where the bottom drops and the pole must reach deeper, a low bridge where you stoop without thinking. The smell changes as you pass cottages, gardens, boat sheds, and open water, smoke, onions, damp linen, manure, cut grass, peat dust. A whole day can be read by smell. For a Utrecht peat bagger, transport is part of the labor because fuel has no value until it reaches the place where someone can use it. The finished turf may move along small waterways toward a yard, a road, or a larger canal. It may pass through hands before it warms a room. Each block, once lifted from black water, becomes part of a chain of quiet work that extends beyond the marsh. Sometimes you pass other boats, and everyone knows how to make room with few words. A nod, a shifted pole, a slight pull toward the bank. The channels are narrow, and the manners of the water are practical. A careless boatman can waste another person's time, but an experienced one leaves barely a ripple. Courtesy here is not a fine speech. It is knowing where your bow should be. As afternoon light begins to soften, we come back again to the working strip, where the day has left its marks in rows, heaps, and footprints. The peat dredged at dawn lies spread across the field. Yesterday's turves stand on edge. Older stacks wait for loading. Tools rest where they were last needed. Not tidy yet, but understood. The whole place looks like a workshop without walls. You rinse a shovel in the channel, rubbing the blade with a handful of grass or reed. Dark water clouds and clears. The long handle of the bagger boigle leans against a post, and drops fall from the net in a slow pattern. Your hands ache when they are finally empty. It is a deep ache, not sharp, and it belongs to the palms, wrists, shoulders, and the place between the shoulder blades. There is still more to do before the day loosens its grip. Ropes must be checked. A loose stack may need setting right. If rain threatens, Covers, reeds or boards may be arranged where they can help, though no cover can protect everything. The boat is bailed if too much water has gathered. A pail scrapes along the bottom, lifts, pours, and scrapes again, the sound hollow in the dimming air. You look over the field the way a careful person looks over a room before leaving it. Not with pride exactly, though some pride may be there. More with responsibility. The peat is not finished just because your arms are tired. It is in process, held between mud and fuel, between water and fire. Your labor has moved it one step along that path, and tomorrow will ask for another. The difficulty of the work lies partly in this unfinished feeling. A factory whistle may end a shift, and a shop door may close, but the drying field keeps changing after you leave. Rain may come, wind may rise, a stack may lean, crows may pick at something, children may wander too close, or a sudden shower may darken the day's best surface. The marsh does not stop working because you have gone home. Still, there is comfort in knowing the order of things. Morning dredging, spreading, turning, cutting, stacking, loading, moving along the canal, cleaning tools, watching the sky. The order does not make the work easy, but it gives the body a map. When your mind is tired, the map remains. You follow it the way a boat follows the cut between reeds. The evening air grows cooler, and the smell of peat changes again as shadows lengthen over the Utrecht wetland. Fresh bagger smells sharp and wet. Drying turf smells dusty and warm. Smoke from cottages brings the whole matter around in a circle, because somewhere nearby, older peat is already burning in a stove, giving back its stored heat in a low red glow. What you lift today may become that warmth later. We can stand for a moment beside the stacked turves and feel the day settle. The surface of each block is rough, ribbed by plant fibers and drying cracks. When you pick one up, it seems almost too light to have come from such heavy mud. That is the secret transformation at the center of the job. Water leaves, air enters. The dark mass becomes something a person can carry home. Your boots make soft prints on the path back toward the boat. The ground is firmer in places where many feet have passed, but it still holds the memory of water. A frog slips from the bank. Reeds brush against your sleeve. The sky over the flat land is wide, and the last light sits low behind scattered clouds, turning the channels silver where they catch it. A 1910s Utrecht Peat Bagger does not need to name the beauty of the place to know it. You may be too tired for fine words. You may only notice that the wind has dropped, or that the church bell sounds clearer in the evening, or that the smoke from a cottage chimney rises straight for once. But noticing is enough. Work teaches attention before it teaches language. When you step into the punt again, the boards feel familiar under your soles. The long pole lies ready. The empty boat rides higher now, with a faint rocking that feels almost light after the loaded afternoon. You push away gently, and the bank drifts back. The water is dark under the bow, and the reeds make a soft line against the sky, as if the whole marsh were closing its eyes by degrees. The pole touches bottom with a dull softness, and you feel the old peat bed answer through the wood, as if the place itself is still breathing underwater. You press and glide, while the empty punt slips between the reed walls and carries you toward the small landing where tools can be left. The evening has a grey-green light now, and every sound seems a little nearer. The drip from the pole, the hush of water along the boards, the faint creak of your tired knees as you shift your weight and let the boat find its line. At this hour, the Utrecht Peat country feels less like a workplace and more like a room that has been used all day and is waiting to be put back in order. The strips of land are narrow and dark. The water holds pieces of sky between them. You pass a row of standing turves, each one angled slightly for air, and the small shadows make them look like a quiet congregation. We keep our voice low here, because the marsh itself has lowered its voice, and because your work has become the work of noticing what remains. You bring the punt in with a soft bump against the bank, catching the post with one hand while the other steadies the pole. The rope is damp and rough, with little fibers lifting against your palm. It smells of water, tar, and the faint sourness of peat that has soaked into everything it has touched. You loop it once, then again, and pull it snug without making a performance of it, because a good knot at evening is simply a kindness to the morning. The boat rocks, then settles, and your boots step carefully onto the bank. The landing is no grand place, only a worn patch where feet have made the mud firm through use. There may be a few boards laid down, dark with age and slick along the edges. A pail sits upside down near a stack of stakes. A broken rake head rests against a willow, waiting for someone with time and wire. You lift the baggerbogle from the punt, and the long handle feels longer now than it did at dawn, as if the day has added its own weight to the wood. You do not carry the dredging tool far. It belongs near the water, where the next morning will find it. Still, you take the trouble to lay it well, with the scoop raised enough that it will not sink into mud overnight. The ring is smeared with dark paste. The netting holds threads of root, reed, and soft black crumbs. You pull some of them free with your fingers, and the wet fibers cling before they release, leaving a cold trace across your skin. We can feel the small patience in that gesture. Cleaning a tool in this work is never a perfect act. Peat remains in seams, in cracks, and under iron bands. It dries where it wants. It finds the grain of wood and darkens it year by year. But you clear what should be cleared, because a tool that is put away carelessly steals strength from tomorrow. You rinse the scoop in the channel with slow swings, letting the water pass through it, and each swing makes a muted sound, half splash and half sigh, as if the tool is tired too. Beyond the landing, the drying field waits in its evening order. This part of the day asks you to walk it again, though your body would rather turn home. You move along the legica with careful steps, keeping away from the softest places, and you look at the rows of cut peat as a baker might look at loaves in a cooling room. Some blocks have held their shape well. Some edges have slumped. Some places will need a touch in the morning, and you keep those marks in your mind like quiet notes written in mud. A 1910s Utrecht Peat Bagger cannot leave memory behind at the field. There are too many small things to remember, and few of them are written down. Which row was turned before noon? Which stack leaned after the wind shifted? Which channel edge is crumbling where the boat rubs too close? Which wet patch still needs a drain scratched beside it? The work fills the mind with plain details, and yet those details are strangely soothing, because they are attached to things you can see, touch, and set right. You kneel beside a row where the turfs have settled too deeply into the damp surface. The ground is cool through the fabric at your knee. You slide your fingers beneath one block and feel its underside, still wetter than it should be, smooth and a little sticky. You lift it, turn it, and set it back at a slight angle so air can find the hidden side. The movement is small, but it matters. In peat work, so much of the day is made of small corrections. A cart road may run not far away, raised just enough above the wet land to keep wheels from sinking too badly. In the evening, you can sometimes hear an iron rim strike a stone, followed by the dull roll of a cart carrying sacks, tools, or perhaps people going home. The sound comes and goes behind reeds and low sheds. It reminds you that the peat fields are not separate from the villages. They are part of the same working body, with water for veins and paths for bones. The air cools under your collar, and the sweat that gathered during the afternoon turns chilly now. You roll your sleeves down with fingers that do not quite want to bend. The cloth catches over dried peat on your forearms, and you brush it away as best you can. Some of it falls in brown flakes. Some remains. There is no need to be clean yet. Cleanliness belongs to the basin at home, to warm water if there is enough, and to the slow rubbing of soap over knuckles. We follow the last round of the field because it tells us why the work was hard in ways that a single photograph never could. A photograph might show a boat, a tool, a man on a strip of land. It cannot show the constant damp at the hem, the watchfulness over weather, the ache from bending, or the way every stage of the peat depends on the stage before it. You live inside a chain of tasks, and if one link weakens, tomorrow feels it. The stacks closest to drying are given your closest attention. A stack of turf is a simple thing from the outside, but the inside must breathe. You touch the side and feel whether the blocks are warm from the day or cool with trapped damp. You pull one piece loose, sniff it without thinking, and set it back in a better place. The scent is earthy and dry at the edge, but deeper in, there is still the old wet smell of the bog. That smell is the truth of it. There is skill in knowing when not to touch something. A block lifted too soon may break. A stack rebuilt too often wastes time. A wet patch trampled in the evening may be worse by morning. So you move slowly, and sometimes the best work is only looking. The fading light helps and hinders. It lays gentle color on everything, but it also hides the small signs. You bend closer, bringing your face near the peat, and the smell rises as steady as memory. In the 1910s, much of this labor still belongs to bodies rather than engines. There are pumps and mills in the wider waterland, and machines in towns, and rails carrying coal toward places that once burned more turf. But here on the field, the decisive measures remain human. The reach of your arm, the strength in your back, the judgment in your fingertips, the ordinary endurance of standing in damp ground through a day that began before the sun had settled on its own color. A late breeze crosses the channel and lifts the smell of waterweed. It moves through the reed heads with a sound like dry paper. Somewhere close by, a chain taps against a boat ring, once, then again. You pause and listen, because small sounds carry well over water when the day is thinning. We can imagine the stillness around you, not empty, but full of quiet working things, insects, water, soft mud, settling wood, and the low breath of evening. The bridge to the next part of the day is not a bell or a command, but the slow change in light that tells you the field has had enough of your hands for now. You turn from the rows and walk back toward the shed or little store place where tools are gathered, each step careful on the narrow land between water and water. The place could lose its edges quickly in darkness. A worker learns the safe places by foot, and your feet remember them without needing your eyes to say much. The shed, if there is one, is plain and low, built to keep the worst rain off tools and dry things that must not be soaked through. It smells of old wood, peat dust, rope, and perhaps a trace of oil from a hinge or lantern. The door does not close cleanly. Many such doors do not. You lift it slightly as you pull, and it gives a wooden groan that seems too large for the little building. Inside, the shadows are soft and brown. You set the shovel against the wall, with the blade turned away, not from ceremony, but because a foot can find an edge in darkness. The rake rests beside it. A short turf knife goes on a shelf, where its handle will be easy to find. There may be a coil of rope, a patched sack, a spare peg, a tin cup, and a bundle of reeds used for covering or marking. Nothing is precious in the usual sense, and yet every object has a use that makes it worth placing well. A lantern may hang from a nail, its glass smoked and thumb-marked. You do not always need it in summer, when the evenings linger, but the sight of it belongs to the work. In darker months, or on a low rainy day, that small flame would turn the shed walls amber and make the wet tools shine. Kerosene has its own sharp smell, different from peat smoke and water, and it clings to fingers after the smallest spill. You know that smell too, as part of the season. Outside, a voice calls across the channel. asking something practical. Whether a boat is tied, whether the weather will hold, whether a certain stack was turned. You answer in the few words the question needs. Working places often have their own way of speaking, not unfriendly, simply economical. Too much talk can tire a person after a long day. Still, a human voice at evening can feel warm, especially when it comes over water and arrives softened by distance. The Utrecht peat fields are not lonely in the way a mountain might be lonely. They are threaded with people, paths, boats, and small obligations. But each worker spends long stretches inside his own rhythm, and tonight, that worker is you. The scoop goes down by your hand, the turf turns in your hand, the boat obeys the pressure from your shoulder. We keep returning to that, because it matters. This is not a distant trade seen through a museum case. It is work felt through skin. You leave the shed and cross to the water's edge once more. The sky has gone pale near the horizon, and deeper overhead. The first evening cool has settled into the hollows, and a faint mist may begin to gather where the water held the day's warmth. It is thin at first, almost nothing, just a whitening close to the surface. Then it spreads in quiet bands between the strips of land, making the reeds look taller and the channels narrower. The walk home from the peat field may be by path, by boat, or by a little of both. Tonight, you take the boat along the channel toward the place where houses sit closer together. The empty punt feels responsive beneath you, almost lively after the burden of turf. You push gently, and the long pole slides against your palm. The water, dark now, folds around the bow without sound for a moment, then breaks into little murmurs along the side. As you move, the day behind you begins arranging itself in memory. The first cold grip of the pole, the heavy pull of the wet peat, the shine of the black spread field, the dry knock of older turves in the afternoon, the taste of bread eaten with dirty hands. None of it asks to be made dramatic. It is enough that it happened, again and again, as it has happened through many working days in the Utrecht lowlands, where people have coaxed fuel from water. There were older men in this work who could tell where peat lay by the feel of the bottom. They might speak of depths, layers, and places where the material changed from fibrous to fine, from good fuel to troublesome muck. You listen when they talk, even if they do not talk often. Knowledge comes in fragments while a rope is being tied, or a tool is being mended. A sentence dropped in passing can save you an hour later, and perhaps a backache besides. You may have learned as a child by standing where you were told to stand, carrying what you were trusted to carry, and watching more than speaking. Peat work leaves little room for careless lessons. Water is near, tools are heavy, weather is unforgiving, yet the teaching is rarely grand. Someone shows you how to hold the handle lower. Someone corrects the angle of a turf in a stack. Someone says quietly that this patch needs another day, and you remember the feel of it. By the 1910s, childhood in working households often ended gradually rather than all at once. A boy or girl might begin with errands, gathering, turning light pieces, watching younger children near the field, bringing food, or helping stack the smaller turves. The work entered the body in stages. By the time you were expected to do a full day's labor, the place had already taught you its smells, its hazards, and its small comforts. That kind of learning is slow and thorough. A low bridge comes ahead, black against the last light. You know its height and stoop before reaching it, letting the pole trail for a moment as the punt glides through. The underside smells of damp timber and algae. Drops fall from the boards into the channel, spaced like a lazy clock. On the other side, the water opens slightly, and the sound of the village grows clearer, though still muted, as if every house has cloth over its windows. Peat smoke is one of the first signs of home. It has a smell unlike coal smoke, softer in one way, earthier, with a damp sweetness when the fire is low. It hangs close to cottages in still weather. You know, that some of the smoke may come from turf cut months ago, maybe from a field like the one you worked today. The thought is not sentimental exactly. It is practical, circular, and quiet. The work leaves the marsh and returns as warmth. The houses near the peat country may be modest, their walls marked by weather and their thresholds worn by wet boots. A small garden can sit behind a fence, with cabbages, onions, or beans if the soil allows. Laundry may hang heavy in damp air, never fully dry until a better day. A bucket waits by a door. A dog lifts its head, decides you are familiar, and rests again. The evening belongs to small domestic sounds, spoons, lids, low voices, and water poured into basins. You tie the boat where it will be found in the morning. The rope passes around the post with a motion your hands could do in darkness. The knot tightens and you test it once, not twice. The habit is enough. Then you lift the few things you carried with you, perhaps a cloth bundle, perhaps a tin, perhaps nothing but the weight of the day in your shoulders. Your boots step from boat to bank, and for a moment the land feels too steady. We can walk with you toward the doorway, but slowly, because even going inside is part of the work's unwinding. Mud drops from your soles. Peat dust marks your trousers. The air near the house carries food smells now. Boiled potatoes, onions, broth, bread warmed near a stove, or whatever the household has managed. After a day in wet fields, these smells are not decoration. They are comfort with a practical face, and your body understands them before your mind shapes a thought. Inside, the room is likely small, with more use than space in it. A table, chairs, a stove or hearth, hooks for coats, a shelf with cups. The light may come from a lamp whose flame trembles when the door opens. The warmth meets your damp clothes and releases the smell of peat again, stronger for a moment. Someone may tell you to leave the worst mud outside, or say nothing because everyone can see what the day has been. You wash as well as time and water allow. A basin takes the black from your hands, though not from under the nails. The water clouds quickly. You rub at the creases of your fingers, the wrists, the heel of the palm where the pole pressed hardest. The skin is rough, and small cuts make themselves known when soap reaches them. You do not linger over each sting. You notice, rinse, and let the evening carry it away. The meal is plain, but plain food after heavy labor has a deep authority. Potatoes steam when broken. A spoon scrapes a bowl. Bread takes up broth. If there is fish, cheese, bacon, or a little meat, it is eaten with attention. We stay close to the table in our imagining, because the day's work does not end cleanly at the field. It enters the appetite, the posture, the way your hands wrap around a cup and hold warmth there. Conversation may come in pieces. The weather, the neighbor's stack, the price offered by a buyer, a repair needed on the boat, news from Utrecht City, carried by someone who heard it from someone else near the canal. The wider world is present, but softened by the room. Politics, markets, and new machines can seem far away when your socks are drying near the stove and your shoulders have begun to loosen from their labor. Yet the difficulty of being a 1910s Utrecht Peat Bagger includes those faraway things too. A trade can be hard not only because the work strains the body, but because the world may be changing its mind about what the work is worth. Coal, gas, and later other fuels press against peat's old place in daily life. Roads improve. Railways reach farther. Buyers compare prices. The marsh keeps offering peat, but a market can turn away from an old fuel by inches. You may not speak of it in those terms. You might simply say the price is poor this year, or that a merchant is slow to pay, or that fewer orders have come from a familiar yard. The language of change in a working household is often small and exact. A coin not earned, a journey not worth making, a stack kept longer than expected. The future arrives not as a speech, but as a shortfall at the table. Still, the next morning will need you. That is one steady fact. The field does not care whether the century is modernizing. Wet peat still needs lifting. Cut turf still needs turning. A boat still needs balancing. Weather still needs watching. There is comfort in such stubborn tasks, even when they are tiring, because they give the day a shape you can enter. You know where to put your hands when dawn comes. After supper there may be mending. Not always, but often enough. A sleeve torn by a reed stem. A rope that needs whipping at the end. A wooden handle with a split beginning to open. A shoe that has taken too much water. You sit near the light and work slowly, because the body is tired and the eyes are not eager. The room smells of lamp oil, cooked food, damp wool, and the low red heart of the stove. If you mend a rope, the fibers scratch your fingers in a different way than peat. They are dry, stubborn, and slightly oily if the rope has been tarred. You twist and bind, pulling the end tight. A rope in peat work lives a hard life, soaked, dragged, loaded, and left in weather. Good rope costs money. Bad rope costs time. So you give it a few minutes now, while the evening is still warm enough to stay awake inside. There is a quiet dignity in maintenance, though no one may name it. The mended rope, the sharpened blade, the patched boot, the cleaned scoop. These are small acts of resistance against waste. A peat bagger cannot make the weather obey, and cannot set the market price alone, but you can keep your tools ready. You can make tomorrow slightly less difficult by tending to what lies within reach. We can rest there for a moment, in that modest control. Outside the window, the wetland darkens completely. The channels no longer show their shapes except where a pale strip of sky reflects in them. Frogs begin their rough evening calls. A cart passes more slowly now, wheels dull on the road. Somewhere a door closes, and the sound travels cleanly through the cooling air. The workday has withdrawn from the field, but traces of it remain everywhere, in the smell of your clothes, the ache of your hands, and the peat dust near the threshold. Sleep in such a household may come early, not because life is simple, but because the body insists. Before that, you may sit with a cup in hand and feel the chair hold you. Your back finds the wall, your feet, freed from boots at last, feel both sore and grateful. The room's warmth moves through the damp edges of your clothes. Words become fewer. The lamp flame steadies. The day grows narrower and easier to carry. We can let the night pass gently, without rushing it, because tomorrow's labor is already waiting in the dark beyond the windows. The field will gather dew. The tools will cool in the shed. The punt will knock softly at its rope if the wind shifts. The peat blocks turn today. Will sit under the night air, losing a little more moisture if the weather holds. Even while you sleep, the drying continues, quiet and unseen. Before dawn, the world changes again in small ways. The stove may be coaxed back to life. A kettle makes its first thin sounds. Cloth is pulled on over skin that still remembers yesterday's work. The shirt is rough at the collar. The trousers are stiff where old mud dried in the seams. Your boots wait near the door, and when you put them on, they are cold inside at first, then slowly become your own shape again. This is another reason the work is hard. It does not begin fresh each day. It begins with yesterday still in the body. The shoulder that lifted wet peat at dawn must lift again. The palms that gripped the pole must close again. The back that bent over rows of turf must find its hinge again. But there is also a strange mercy in repetition, because the body knows the path before the mind has fully woken. You step outside into the early air, and the smell of the wetland is waiting. Dew on grass, mud cooling overnight, a faint thread of smoke from a stove that never went fully out. The sky is not yet bright, only loosened from black into grey. We are with you again on the way toward the Utrecht Peat field, along the path where the ground is uneven but known. Each step makes a soft sound, and the morning accepts it. The boat is where you left it, which is a small relief no one celebrates. The knot is held. A skin of dew shines along the gunwale. When you touch the rope, it is cold and swollen with night damp. You untie it. Lay your bundle inside and test the pole. The wood feels slick at first, so you wipe it with a cloth or the side of your sleeve. Then you step in, and the punt rocks you into the day. Mist lies low over the channel, and the world beyond the reeds is partly hidden. You push away from the bank, and the bow enters the pale drift without ceremony. The sound of the pole entering water is different in fog, closer and rounder. Drops fall from the raised end and strike the surface behind you. You can smell the peat before you reach the cut, and that smell tells the body what kind of day has begun. When we return to the working place, the legacker appears slowly, first as a dark line, then as a field of rows and stacks. Dew has silvered the tops of the turves. The blocks you turned yesterday are cooler and firmer to the touch, but not dry enough yet. You test one anyway, because testing is how you know. Your thumb presses the edge, and the peat gives slightly. It is moving in the right direction, but it needs more air. The first task may be to undo what night has done. A stack has sagged at one corner. A reed cover has shifted. Water has gathered in a shallow footprint near the new spread. You take the rake and draw a little channel for it, guiding the water away as gently as if drawing a line in porridge. The mud makes a soft tearing sound. The water follows, slow but willing. Sometimes the morning's first victory is that small. Then the dredging begins again. You guide the punt to the cut where yesterday's work left off, and the water there is darker, disturbed and flecked with bits of floating root. The bagger lowers into the channel. The long handle angles across your shoulder. You push down, feel for the layer, and draw back. The scoop fills heavily, resisting as it did before, as it will again, with the old stubbornness of wet peat. Your body complains less once it is moving. That is one of the plain facts of labor. Standing still can make the ache louder, while rhythm gives it somewhere to go. You lift, twist, and empty the scoop into the boat. The peat slaps down, and water runs from it in shining threads. Another pull, another dark load. The morning quiet wraps itself around the motion, and we follow the pace without needing to hurry it. The science of the material is simple enough to feel, even if you never use scientific words for it. Peat forms where plants grow in wet ground and do not fully rot, because water keeps air away. Layer by layer, the old growth gathers into dark, compressed matter. In the Utrecht bogs, that slow making took far longer than any human trade, and now your tool enters it one scoop at a time, bringing the long past into the morning. When the peat is good, it holds together in a heavy, fibrous mass. You can see little strands in it, the remains of roots and stems. Sometimes the scoop brings up a pale piece of wood, preserved by wetness, or a tangled mat of reed root that must be thrown aside. Sometimes the material is too watery, and you feel disappointment before you say anything. A poor scoop weighs as much as a good one, but gives less useful turf. A light rain begins, barely more than a mist settling out of the air. You look up, judge it, and continue. Not every rain stops work. Some only dampens your cap and beads on the pole. The surface of the channel trembles with tiny rings. Your sleeves darken. The fresh peat in the boat shines more brightly. If the rain passes, it will be only another texture of the morning. If it stays, the field's drying will slow, and your plans will shift. This is one of the quiet burdens of peat work, that the same weather can help one task and hinder another. Wet weather keeps dust down, and may soften certain surfaces, but it delays drying. Sun hardens the field and lightens the loads, but too much heat can crack the surface badly. Wind is a friend until it becomes strong enough to disturb covers or dry edges too fast. You learn not to call weather good or bad too quickly. The rain thins after a while, leaving drops along the reeds and on the rim of the boat. You wipe your face with your sleeve and taste salt, rain, and peat dust from yesterday. The channel has a green smell now, stirred by wet leaves and water plants. A duck moves somewhere behind the mist, hidden but audible, pushing through reeds with small splashes. The day remains calm, and the work remains what it was. By the time the punt carries enough wet peat, your arms have settled into the old heaviness. You pole toward the spreading place, careful with the load. A low boat in a narrow channel teaches humility. It does not forgive showing off. You keep your stance broad, your knees loose, and your eyes on the distance between waterline and gunwale. The dark heap shifts slightly when you turn, and the boat answers with a slow roll. At the legaker, you begin unloading. The shovel enters the wet mass with a sucking sound. You lift and throw, building a dark strip across the prepared ground. The peat lands thickly, spreading where it falls. Steam does not rise, but there is a sense of damp breath from it, a closeness that touches the face. We can almost feel the weight in each shovelful, not as a sharp strain, but as a repeated claim. Spreading is not merely emptying the boat, it is making a future surface. You pull the wet peat into a bed of even depth, breaking clumps, filling hollows, and keeping the edges straight enough to cut later. The rake teeth leave lines that soon soften. The board smooths ridges into a dull shine. Your boots sink at the edge, and each step must be chosen so you do not spoil the surface you have just made. There is a satisfaction in seeing the raw heap become a field. It is a modest satisfaction, but real. A few minutes earlier, the peat was a dark lump in a boat. Now it lies in order, opened to wind and waiting for sun. Work like this gives visible proof of effort, though it also keeps reminding you that proof is not completion. You have made a beginning. The rest belongs to weather, time, and more bending. Around you, the peat country wakes fully. Voices come clearer. Another punt scrapes against a landing. A woman shakes a cloth outside a cottage, and the snap carries over the water. From farther away, perhaps toward the road, a horse snorts and harness metal chimes lightly. These are not interruptions. They are the day's ordinary music, and your work fits among them. One rhythm layered with another until the wetland feels quietly alive. The Utrecht Peat Bagger's morning is full of measuring without instruments. You measure depth with the pole, moisture with the fingers, balance with the knees, and distance with the body. You know how far a loaded boat can be pushed before rest. You know how much wet peat can lie on one field without becoming too thick. You know when a strip needs another pass with the rake. None of this is written on paper, but it is exact in its own way. The hardness of the work also comes from its low posture. So much happens below the waist. The scoop pulls downward. The shovel lifts from below. The turves lie at your feet. The boat asks you to brace low and move from hips and back. A person who has not done such work may imagine only the arms, but the whole body is enlisted, even the toes gripping inside boots when the boards are slick. You straighten now and then, not for long, and look across the flat, wet country. The city of Utrecht may feel near in miles, but here it belongs to another kind of time. Church towers and warehouses, university rooms and shop windows, all of them depend on work that often happens out of sight. Fuel arrives, as if it were only fuel. Few who warm their hands over a fire picture the wet scoop, the narrow boat, or your shoulders under the grey morning. But you know the route from this field toward use. You know the loaded boat, the canal, the storage yard, the weighing or counting, the buyer who judges quality by touch and dryness. You know that a poor stack can mean complaints later. You know that damp turf smokes badly and pays badly. Every careful motion in the field travels forward to someone else's stove, kitchen, washhouse or workshop. Near mid-morning, the new spread lies smooth enough, and you turn to older rows again. These were cut earlier, and the turves are ready for another turning. You stoop and lift. The block feels cool, with a firmer crust and a damp underside. You rotate it so the hidden side faces air. Then the next and the next. A row that seemed short at a glance becomes long when each piece needs your hand. We can let the repetition do its quiet work on us. Lift, turn, set. Lift, turn, set. The sounds are small, a soft knock, a brushing crumble, a faint sigh as the turf leaves the damp bed. Your fingers learn which pieces to grip at the ends and which must be supported from below. Some break despite care. When they do, you set the fragments aside or press them where they can still dry usefully. Waste is avoided, but not mourned loudly. A child may come along the path carrying something wrapped in cloth. The steps are careful because the strip is narrow. You glance up, take the bundle, and say the few words that belong to such a moment. Bread, perhaps, or a message from home, or a reminder about something needed later. The child looks at the black field, the wet boat, your stained hands, and learns the shape of the work by seeing it close. In peat districts, the boundary between workplace and household is often thin. A family may depend on the season's yield. Women may help turn and stack. Children may carry, gather and watch. Older relatives may mend, sort, or keep account in the ways they can. The work is not romantic for them. It is how life is arranged. Yet within that arrangement, there are small tendernesses, a wrapped meal, dry socks set near heat, a warning called across water. The sun breaks through near noon, and the entire field changes color. Wet places shine black, drier blocks warm to brown. Drops on reed tips become points of light. The channel reflects a pale blue opening in the clouds, and for a little while the day feels generous. You turn your face toward the warmth without stopping completely, because a peat bagger learns to receive comfort while still working. The sun touches your cheek, and the next turf waits in your hand. Sun after mist can raise smells from everything. The peat gives off its deep earthy note. The wood of the boat warms and smells faintly resinous where it has been rubbed. Your damp wool releases its own human scent, not unpleasant, only honest. Grass crushed underfoot smells green and sharp. Somewhere, a stove smoke thread still hangs from a cottage, and all these smells meet in the air, making the workplace as real as any room. This is the hour when insects become more troublesome. Gnats hover near the water and around your face. You brush them away with the back of your wrist, leaving another dark streak on your skin. A fly settles on the handle of the rake, then lifts when you reach for it. The annoyance is mild, but constant. Hard work is made of such mild constants as much as heavy loads, little discomforts that gather like dust. You take food standing or sitting low near the field, depending on the wetness of the ground. The bread is firmer at the crust and soft where it held a little moisture from the wrapping. Cheese is salty. Coffee has cooled, but it still cuts through the earthy taste in your mouth. You drink slowly. We remain beside you in that pause, watching the rows and hearing the water move softly against the bank. A pause in peat work is never fully empty. While you eat, you look. That row could stand another turn. That stack is drying well. That corner of the new spread is too thick. The boat needs a little bailing. Your eyes keep working because the field is full of messages, yet the body takes what rest it can. The hands open, the shoulders drop. For a few minutes, even a narrow strip of ground can feel like a seat. After the meal, you bail the punt. Rainwater and seepage have gathered in the bottom, darkened by peat crumbs. The pail goes down, scrapes, lifts and pours into the channel. Scrape, lift, pour. The sound is hollow and oddly calming. Each throw clears a little more space in the boat, though a thin film always remains. Boats in this work are never dry in the way a house floor is dry. They are only dry enough. The afternoon is for moving older turf toward a larger stack, and that means carrying. The blocks are not heavy one by one, but the pile is large, and the path is awkward. You load a basket or barrow with care, not too full, because a dropped load wastes both effort and shape. The rough peat surfaces rasp against each other. Dust rises faintly now, brown and dry, and it catches in the throat if the wind blows wrong. You move from row to stack, from stack to row, building height little by little. A good stacking place is chosen for drainage and air. You lay the first course with spaces enough to breathe, then cross the next course so the pile holds. The pattern is simple, and the simplicity is its strength. Your hands place each turf by memory, adjusting edges with a tap, leaving small channels where air can slip through. As the stack grows, it begins to smell different inside. The outer turfs are dry and dusty. The inner ones hold a hidden coolness. You feel it when your hand passes between them. If the stack is built well, that coolness will leave slowly without turning sour. If built badly, it may stay and spoil the quality. So you do not hurry, though the afternoon is moving. Care is not delay here. Care is the shortest path to usable fuel. The Utrecht Peat Bagger works with a product that shrinks as it becomes valuable. Wet mass becomes smaller dry turf. Weight leaves. Water disappears into air. What remains must be firm enough to travel and dry enough to burn. This can make the work feel strange, because so much labor is spent helping something become less wet, less heavy, less raw. Yet in that lessening, the peat becomes more useful, and the day earns its purpose. A buyer might later judge the turf by color, dryness, hardness, and how it burns. Good peat should catch properly and give steady heat. Poor peat may smoke, crumble, or leave too much ash. You think of these judgments while stacking, though perhaps not in formal language. You simply know that today's care will be felt later in a stove. The person tending that stove may never know your name, but the fire will know your work. The afternoon wind strengthens enough to move your cap brim and push at the reeds. This is useful for drying, but it makes handling lighter turfs trickier. A block set carelessly can topple. Dust lifts from the stack and touches your face. The water darkens in little ripples. You pause to steady a cover, press a stake deeper, and adjust the side of the pile so the breeze passes through rather than pulling it apart. By now your movements are slower but more exact. Fatigue removes flourish. It leaves only the necessary motion. Bend, lift, turn, place, step back, look, reach again. There is a kind of quiet beauty in that economy, though no one in the field may stop to admire it. A tired worker who knows the task wastes little. The body finds the shortest honest path between ground and stack and follows it. We stay with that tiredness without making it grim. It is part of the truth, but not the whole truth. There is the ache, yes, and the damp and the uncertainty of pay and weather. There is also the feel of a row completed, the sight of a straightened stack, the brief warmth of sun on wet sleeves, the shared nod from another worker who sees that you have done the job cleanly. These things are small, but they hold. Late in the day, you return to the new peat bed one more time. Its surface has already changed under the sun and wind. What was glossy in the morning is now duller, with a skin beginning to form. You do not cut it yet. It needs more firmness. But you check the thickness, mend an uneven edge, and clear a place where water has lingered. The rake moves lightly now, because too much force would break the forming surface. The field teaches restraint as much as strength. In the morning, you pull hard from the water. At midday, you spread and shape. In the afternoon, you turn and stack. At evening, you sometimes do best by leaving things alone. Each stage asks for a different kind of hand. The hard part is not only doing the heavy thing, it is knowing when the heavy thing would be wrong, and a lighter touch would serve better. Clouds gather again toward the west, low and grey underneath. You glance at them often. Everyone in the field does. No one needs to announce it. The air cools slightly, and the smell of rain returns, metallic and green. A decision must be made about the driest stacks and the most vulnerable rows. You set aside one task and move to another, because peat work is always being rearranged by the sky. The day writes, and you answer. Reed mats, boards, or simple covers may be placed where they can help. Not every turf can be sheltered, and not every shower is worth a scramble, but some rows are at just the wrong stage for heavy rain. You work with others now, perhaps moving faster but not frantically. A cover is pulled straight, a weight is set, a stack side is checked. The first drops come large and spaced apart, darkening the dust on your sleeve. The rain does not break hard, it settles in, steady and fine. The sound on water is soft, like many fingers tapping. On covers it is duller. On your cap it is intimate and close. You accept that the last part of the day will be wet. There is no use scolding the sky. You finish what can be finished, leave what must wait, and feel the cold water find the back of your neck where the collar has loosened. This sort of rain shows why the work was hard to plan. A town clock can divide hours neatly, but weather divides them in its own fashion. A morning's intention may become an afternoon's repair. A field that seemed ready may need another day. A load meant for transport may wait, because the path is slick. The peat bagger's schedule is not soft because the worker lacks discipline. It is soft because water has a vote. You gather the tools earlier than you might have on a dry evening. The shovel is heavier with wet mud clinging to it. The rake teeth hold dark strings of peat. The long scoop drips steadily as you carry it. Your sleeves cling to your forearms, and the cloth at your knees is cold. Still, the rain also quiets the field beautifully. It presses down dust, smooths small marks, and turns every channel into a trembling grey mirror. At the shed, you lean the tools under cover and listen for a moment. Rain on the roof, water falling from eaves, a distant voice made blurred by weather. The smell inside grows stronger, old peat and wet wood waking together. You wipe the handle of the shovel because it will be worse if left slick. You clear the rake with a stick. You set the scoop where air can pass around it. Even in rain, order remains possible. The punt waits low against the bank, gathering drops. You step in carefully, because wet wood is treacherous after a long day. The boat shifts and your knees answer. You push away with the pole, feeling the bottom through rain-dimpled water. The journey home is slower now, not because the distance has changed, but because the whole world has softened at the edges. Reeds blur, houses blur. The line between water and air becomes less certain. Rain brings smells close to the surface. The channel smells of stirred mud. The banks smell of grass and peat. The boat smells of soaked wood. Your own clothes smell of labor, rain, and smoke held from the previous evening. We drift with you through it, keeping the pace of the pole, one push and then another. The work is done enough for now, though the field will continue changing under the rain long after you leave. A barge may pass on a wider waterway, dark and slow, carrying goods toward Utrecht or away from it. You give it room and feel its small wake reach your punt after it has gone by. The loaded world moves in such ways, one craft disturbing another, one trade touching the edge of the next. Peat, milk, vegetables, coal, timber, bricks, people, all moving through water routes that make the low country work. Your little boat is part of that larger traffic. Near home, lamps begin to show in windows. Not bright, not many, just warm squares in the wet dusk. They reflect in the channel as broken gold lines, trembling whenever rain strikes. You guide the punt toward the post, catch the rope, and tie with wet fingers. The knot is harder in rain because the rope has swollen and your hands are stiff. You take an extra breath and do it properly. Tomorrow deserves that much. The path to the door is muddier now. Your boots carry the field with them. Rain runs from your cap brim. Someone inside may hear your step and open before you knock, letting out a small wash of warmth and cooking smell. You cross the threshold carefully, because wet floors remember every footprint. The room is dim and human, and the day, which was wide and grey outside, becomes narrow enough to fit around a table. Again, there is washing, though the water feels colder on skin already chilled. You rub the peat from your hands and see the basin cloud almost black. The nails remain dark. The cracks in your knuckles keep their shadow. A towel, rough from many washings, takes the worst damp from your face. Dry cloth against wet skin feels almost luxurious, though no one would use such a word aloud. It is simply relief. The stove is low, but alive. Peat burns there with a steady red heart, not roaring, not leaping, just giving itself slowly to heat. You can smell the fuel more clearly because you have spent the day among its earlier forms. The block in the stove was once wet matter under a sky much like this one. Someone cut it, turned it, stacked it, and carried it. Now it warms the room where another worker sits drying his sleeves. That circle is quiet enough to miss if you hurry past it. But tonight we do not hurry. The peat below water, the peat in the boat, the peat on the field, the turf in the stack, the turf in the stove, the warmth in the room, and the tired hands held toward that warmth all belong to one long process. It is not abstract. It is as real as steam from a bowl and rain ticking on the window. Supper tastes of the weather. Hot food has more meaning when rain has worked its way into your cuffs. You eat with the steady appetite of someone who has spent the day lifting water disguised as earth. A spoonful of potatoes, a drink, a piece of bread pressed into gravy or broth. The room sounds close around you, chairs shifting, quiet talk, the stove settling, rain tracing its fingers down the glass. If talk turns to tomorrow, it is practical. The rain may stop by midnight. The west field will need checking first. The new spread must not be touched too early. The stack by the willow should be opened if the wind turns fair. Someone mentions that a buyer may come later in the week, and you picture the stacks as they are, measuring their readiness in your mind while your hands rest around the cup. This mental work is another hidden part of the job. Even when seated, you carry the field inside you. The rows and cuts arrange themselves behind your eyes. You know what must happen first if the morning is dry, and what must change if the rain continues. Such thinking is not restless in the modern sense. It is tied to weather, material, and task, and because it is concrete, it can become almost soothing. Later, when the room grows quieter, you may take a tool handle across your knees and inspect a rough place by lamplight. The wood has raised a splinter where water entered the grain. You smooth it with a knife or a bit of glass, slowly, carefully, so tomorrow's palm will not pay for neglect. The shaving curls away pale against the darker handle. It smells faintly sweet beneath the peat and rain. A small repair, a small mercy. The lamp throws soft shadows over your hands. They look older in that light, even if you are not old. Peatwork marks the hands early. Thickened skin, dark lines, swollen knuckles after cold days, small healed cuts. These are not decorations. They are records. Each mark belongs to some ordinary moment, a slipping tool, a rough rope, a cold morning, a wet block carried too long. The hands remember everything without making a speech. Outside, the rain eases. You notice because the roof grows quieter. The room does not change at once, but everyone senses the difference. A lighter tapping, then drops from the eaves rather than rain from the sky. The night opens a little. Perhaps tomorrow will be workable. Perhaps not. You have learned to leave such thoughts unfinished until morning. The marsh is better read by daylight, and worry in darkness tries nothing. When sleep comes, it comes through the body first. The shoulders sink, the jaw loosens. The legs grow heavy in a way that is almost pleasant once there is no more standing to do. The last sounds are household sounds and water sounds mixed together. A cup set down, a low word, a drip from the roof, the soft settling of peat in the stove. The day does not end with a declaration. It thins, like mist over a channel. Morning, when it returns, brings a clearer sky than expected. The rain has washed the air, and the world smells new without being new at all. The path to the field is slick, but the clouds have lifted. You walk with a little stiffness, feeling where yesterday settled into muscle. The reeds are bright with drops. The channels show a pale reflection. Somewhere a bird gives a rough call from the bank, then disappears into the green. At the field, the first inspection is slow and careful. Rain has darkened the exposed turves, but it has not ruined them. The covers held where they were placed well. One corner has sagged. A shallow pool lies where the new spread was lowest. You stand looking for a long moment, letting the whole field speak before you begin. A less patient worker might rush to one problem. You have learned to see the pattern first. The pool is dealt with by drainage, not anger. You take the rake and open a narrow runnel toward the edge, just enough for the water to move without tearing the bed apart. It slips along the little channel, carrying a faint brown cloud with it. The sound is barely there. You watch until the surface begins to lower. Then you move to the sagging stack, where wet outer turves must be reset for air. The wet blocks feel heavier again, as if the night has put some of the marsh back into them. You lift and rebuild, spacing them with care. Your fingers sink into softened edges. The stack gives off a cool, closed smell where damp has gathered. You open it, loosen it, and let the morning air enter. This is not undoing the work, it is continuing it. Peat drying is a conversation, and rain has simply spoken its part. As the sun strengthens, steam still does not rise visibly, but the field seems to exhale. Drops shrink along the reed stems. The surface of the new peat turns from glossy black toward dull brown again. You work through the morning in tasks chosen by need rather than habit, and that is another skill of the Utrecht Peat Bagger. Routine gives the frame, but judgment fills each day differently. The same field is never quite the same field twice. Today, the dredging waits while drying work takes priority. That decision costs output from the water, but saves what has already been raised. You walk the rows with the turf knife, testing, loosening, trimming edges where rain blurred yesterday's cuts. The blade makes a soft, dense sound entering the peat. The handle rests against the heel of your hand. The lines must be re-established gently, because forcing them would break the forming blocks. Cutting peat at the right moment is a satisfying task. The material yields cleanly but not limply. It holds the mark. You press down, draw back, and move along the row, leaving straight divisions that will later become individual turves. The eye enjoys the order. The body enjoys, for a while, that this work is less violent than dredging. But the stoop remains, and after many cuts, the lower back begins its familiar quiet complaint. We can hear the small sounds clearly in this work. The blade entering peat, the faint suction as it leaves, the rustle of your sleeve against your side, the distant clop of a horse on the road, the soft clink of a pail from another worker's boat. These sounds make a fabric under the day, and because none of them rises sharply, they let the mind drift while the hands continue their careful measuring. A cloud shadow passes over the field, cooling your face. Then sun returns. The blocks darken and lighten with every change above them. The peat seems almost alive in the way it responds to weather, though it is old dead plant matter becoming fuel. You do not need to make a philosophy of that. Still, after years of this work, a person may feel that the land has moods, and that respecting them is simply practical. Toward midday, the rows cut earlier are firm enough to lift onto edge. This is slow work, but important. Flat blocks dry poorly underneath. On edge, they give more surface to wind. You slide fingers under one piece, lift carefully, and stand it upright with a slight lean. Then the next. A line of flat dark pieces becomes a line of standing pieces, and the field changes shape behind you as you pass. The motion repeats until it becomes almost dreamlike. Bend, lift, stand. Bend, lift, stand. You do not make a chant of it because the work itself is enough. The turves vary slightly in size and strength, and each asks a small adjustment. One needs a gentler grip, one must be pressed at the base, one breaks and is set aside. The fingers become patient judges, and the row slowly rises. This stage shows another reason the job was hard. Much of the value depended on handling fragile things, without the luxury of gentleness in the day as a whole. You are tired, damp, and pressed by weather, yet the turf in your hand may need delicacy. Strength and care have to live together. Too much force wastes the block. Too little firmness wastes the hour. The good worker finds the middle by feel. A breeze comes across the water, carrying the smell of flowering weeds from a ditch bank, faint and sweet under the heavier peat scent. You notice it only because the wind shifts while you are bent low. It is there, then gone. Such small sweetnesses are scattered through rough work like threads in coarse cloth. They do not change the wage or lighten the load, but they touch the day with something a person can keep privately. When the row is done, you stand and look back. The upright turfs make a dark comb along the field. The sight is orderly, and order after labor has its own restfulness. You drink from your tin, water tasting of metal and the cloth it was wrapped in. It is not cold now, but it is wet and needed. You swallow slowly, feeling the throat clear of peat dust and morning dryness. The sun climbs, and the legacker narrows under its brightness. Water flashes on both sides. This thin strip of land carries much responsibility. It must hold the drying peat, the footpath, the tools, the stacks, and the worker moving among them. Many peat fields in these regions were vulnerable to erosion, and narrow strips could fail when water widened around them. You know this not as landscape history, but as an edge under your boot that must be respected. You keep away from crumbling margins. A lost edge means lost drying ground, and sometimes lost turf. The water nibbles patiently at weak places. Boat wakes add their little push. Rain softens. Frost can loosen. Over years, the shape of a peat landscape changes, because work and water both have hands on it. The fields are made by people, but never fully owned by them. The water remains a partner, and a patient one. In the afternoon, a small delivery of finished turf must be moved toward a waiting boat on a broader channel. This batch is dry enough to travel. The blocks sound hollow light when tapped together. They are stacked near a shed, under a cover that smells of reed and weather. You remove the cover, fold it back, and feel the dry dust rise. It settles on the tongue with a faint bitter earthiness. Loading finished turf is cleaner than dredging, but only by comparison. Dust gets into cuffs, hair, and the corners of the eyes. The blocks scrape the skin. Some are crumbly along the edges, and you learn to lift them from the middle. You pass them hand to hand if others are there, or carry them in armfuls yourself. The pile in the boat grows in a neat wall, course by course, until the empty space becomes a cargo. A larger turf boat may take the load farther along the water system, perhaps toward a yard where fuel is stored and sold. You may not make the whole journey today. Your part may be only to load, count, and balance. Counting can be done by stacks, rows, bundles, or local habit, and it must be accurate enough that no argument follows later. Numbers are spoken, remembered, and sometimes marked, though the work remains deeply physical. The buyer or carrier may test the turf with a hand, breaking one piece, weighing another by feel. You watch without showing too much feeling. A worker learns to accept inspection as part of trade, though it can sting when the season has been difficult. If the turf is good, the blocks speak for themselves. They are dry, firm, and even. If not, no speech will make them so. The material has the final word. This connection between handwork and judgment gives the job its constant pressure. Every earlier choice is present at loading. The depth of the spread, the day of cutting, the timing of turns, the care of stacking, the protection from rain. A buyer sees only the final turf, but you see the whole chain inside it. Each block is a small record of weather and labor, compressed into something that can be burned. The loaded boat sits lower now, with its cargo rising in tidy brown layers. You adjust the sides, fitting odd pieces where they will not fall. A rope is drawn across to secure the top. The smell of dry turf is strong in the sun, dusty and warm, almost like a field after harvest, though darker and wetter in memory. You step back and look along the gunwale to be sure the weight is even. When the carrier pushes away, the boat moves slowly, burdened but balanced. The water parts around it. A few crumbs of turf fall from the side and float briefly before darkening and sinking. You watch it go toward the wider channel, and there is a small release in seeing the work leave the field. Not completion, not exactly, but movement. Something has passed from your hands into the next part of its life. Then the field feels larger for a moment, because the stack is gone. The empty place beneath it is marked by dust and pale scraps. You sweep or gather what can be used, saving fragments for lesser purposes if they are worth saving. Nothing in such work is casually discarded. Even broken peat may dry into kindling or be used where quality matters less. Poverty teaches thrift, but so does respect for effort already spent. By late afternoon, the light softens again, and we return to the slower tasks that close the working day. You check the standing rows, now drier on the sunward side. Some can be turned slightly, others should stay. The decision is made one block at a time. Your hands are tired enough that the lighter turfs feel welcome, and yet the bending remains. There is always another row just beyond the one you finish. The Utrecht Peat Bagger's day is long not only in hours, but in attention. A careless mind can ruin what strong arms have raised. You must keep seeing, keep feeling, keep adjusting. The marsh does not shout its needs. It whispers them through color, smell, weight and touch. A darker patch, a softer edge, a stack leaning by a finger's width. The work asks you to hear those whispers even when your body wants only silence. A church bell carries again, perhaps from the direction of a village, perhaps from farther toward Utrecht. Over water, bells can seem both near and far. The sound arrives rounded, softened by air and reed, and it settles over the field without commanding it. You count the strokes almost without meaning to, then lose count because your hands are placing turves. Time here is measured by bells, yes, but also by drying surfaces and lengthening shadows. There is no sudden ending. The day loosens one task at a time. The last row is checked, the last tool is rinsed, the last loose block is set where air can reach it. You walk the edge of the legaca and look for places the water has bitten too deeply. You press a stake with your boot. You lift a rope away from mud. You set a cover stone more firmly. These are the day's quiet afterthoughts. The bagger bogle is carried back to its resting place. It has done less dredging today than yesterday, but its weight is still familiar. You rinse the ring, pull away a clot of root, and lean the handle beneath the shed's shallow shelter. The shovel follows. The rake follows. Each tool returns to its place. Not perfectly clean, not dry, but ready enough. Readiness is often the best a wet trade can ask for. As evening comes, the sky clears in the west, and the channels catch a strip of low gold. The reed tops glow briefly, each stem edged with light. Your clothes are stained, your hands are rough, and your back is tired, but the field before you has moved forward. Rows stand, stacks breathe. A boat has gone out loaded. Water drains from the new spread. These are small facts, and they are enough for the hour. You stand with one boot on the bank and one in the punt, feeling the difference between earth and boat. The boat shifts. The bank holds. For a peat worker, much of life happens between those two kinds of support, solid and floating, fixed and yielding. You move carefully because each has its own rules. Then you step fully aboard, take the pole, and push away from the field that will remain awake in its own quiet way. The route home is familiar again, but never identical. Tonight the air is clearer after the rain. The smells are sharper, wet grass, drying peat, smoke beginning in the houses. The pole touches bottom cleanly. The punt glides past reeds washed bright at their edges. You pass the low bridge and stoop beneath it, hearing the hollow drip from its underside. On the other side, a little open water reflects the evening sky like worn pewter. We let the journey take its time. There is no need to hurry toward the next sentence, just as there is no need to hurry a loaded boat through a narrow cut. Your hands rest on the pole between pushes. Your shoulders lower. The day's work remains in them, but now it has less demand. The water carries part of you for a while, and the quiet of the channel begins to loosen the field from your thoughts. A neighbor's boat moves ahead, almost a silhouette, the figure standing with pole angled back. You follow at a distance that needs no discussion. The two boats make separate ripples that meet and fade. In the still places, you can see bits of floating leaf, reed fluff, and small crumbs of peat drifting without aim. The whole waterway holds the evidence of work, but lightly, as if it knows tomorrow will bring more. When you reach the landing, the evening routine repeats, and repetition makes it restful despite the tiredness. Tie the rope, test the knot, lift the bundle, step to the bank. The same motions that began the day in cold grey light now close it under a softer sky. Your boots know the path, your hands know the gate latch. The house ahead shows lamplight, and the smell from the stove meets you before the door is fully open. Inside, warmth gathers around the damp edges of the day. You set down what you carry. You wash the black from your hands again, though the deepest lines remain. The basin clouds, the towel darkens. You sit, and the chair receives your weight as if it has been waiting. The peat in the stove burns low and steady, and for a little while you do nothing but feel the heat reach your fingers, one slow breath at a time. The heat does not erase the work, but it changes the way the work sits inside you. The ache in your fingers becomes less sharp, and the dampness in your cuffs turns from cold to merely present. You hold your hands toward the stove, without ceremony. Palms open, knuckles dark in their creases, and the red peat fire answers with a steady warmth that asks for nothing. We stay with that small exchange, because it is part of the peat bagger's day too, this moment when the fuel you help make becomes comfort. The room is quiet enough that the stove has a voice. A little settling sound comes from within it, a soft inward collapse as one piece of turf gives way to ash. The smell is earthy and faintly sweet, with a thread of smoke that seems to remember wet fields. Someone moves a pot aside. A spoon touches the table. Outside, the water near the landing laps once against the boat, and the sound reaches the room as a dark, familiar note. You eat slowly because there is no strength in rushing now. The first hunger has passed, and what remains is the plain need to restore what the day has spent. Bread, potatoes, a little fat, perhaps beans or cabbage, whatever the household has made stretch across the week. The flavors are simple, but they arrive deeply. Salt sits on the tongue. Warm food softens the mouth. A cup between both hands carries its heat into the bones of your fingers. In a house tied to peatwork, nothing is very far from the field. A coat near the door smells of damp turf. A child's shoes hold mud at the soles. The corner by the stove may be stacked with a few blocks for the night, each one dry and rough now, though once it lay heavy in a boat. Even the conversation has the shape of the marsh. It moves around weather, orders, drying, neighbors, and whether the wind will turn before morning. You may listen more than speak. Listening is easier after a long day, and the voices in the room rise and fall gently enough. Someone mentions Utrecht City, perhaps a market price, a canal delay, a rumor of work elsewhere, or the cost of coal in a shop window. These matters drift into the room from beyond the wetland, but they settle among bowls and cups like everything else. You hear them, weigh them, and let them rest. The life of a 1910s Utrecht Peat Bagger is never only the field, because the field must be connected to buyers, households, boats, weather reports, and small debts. Still, the field remains the center of gravity. Even when talk turns outward, Your mind returns to the rose standing on edge, to the new spread darkening under evening air, to the stack that breathed better after you opened it. The day's unfinished work sits quietly behind your eyes like a map. After supper, the household settles into the slower work that belongs to lamplight. A needle passes through cloth, a rope end is wrapped, a child leans close to a task, head bent under the weak glow. You take a strip of leather or a bit of cloth and bind a place on the pole where the wood has begun to rub the palm raw. The motion is careful and small. The day has been large enough, and the evening asks for smaller movements. A peat worker's tools do not have to be handsome, but they must be familiar. The handle of the dredging scoop is known by every raised ridge and worn smooth place. The shovel fits your grip in one particular way. The knife has a balance that would mean little to someone else, but you would feel the difference at once if it were replaced. We can think of these tools as companions, though you might simply call them yours. You run your thumb over the repaired binding. It will do for tomorrow. Not forever, but tomorrow is enough. Much of working life is arranged that way. Not by solving everything at once, but by keeping things sound for the next morning, the next load, the next turn in the weather. A knot holds, a patch holds, a stack holds, a person holds. The word itself feels steady in the mouth, as if it belongs to labor. The lamp flame shifts when someone opens the door for a moment. Cool air enters carrying the smell of night water, peat smoke, and wet grass. You look toward the darkness beyond the threshold. The channel reflects almost nothing now, only a few broken glimmers from windows. The boat is a darker shape against dark water. Somewhere out there, the field is quiet under the sky, with its rows, stacks, and soft places waiting beyond sight. When the door closes, the room feels closer. The lamp steadies. The stove breathes. You feel the heaviness that comes after food, warmth, and a day spent mostly outdoors. It begins at the shoulders and moves down into the arms, then into the legs. Your thoughts loosen from their edges. Tomorrow's tasks remain, but they do not press quite as sharply now. The peat field can wait until dawn. For tonight, your body has come inside. Sleep does not need to be described as an escape. It is more like the next necessary tool, placed in the hand by darkness. You lie down with the smell of smoke in your hair and the faint roughness of peat still in your skin. The mattress may be thin, the room cool at the edges, the blanket worn, but the body knows how to receive rest when it has been honestly tired. The last clear sound may be water against the landing. Before morning, the stove falls lower and the house moves through its quietest hours. Outside, the wetland is not silent. Reeds shift. Small creatures move at the banks. The tide boat knocks once, then rests. Mist gathers again in hollows and channels, blurring the narrow strips of land. The turfs on the field cool under the night air. Moisture touches them. Drying slows but does not cease entirely. The work continues in its own faint, unlit way. Dawn comes without drama. A whitening at the window, a small sound from someone waking, the first touch of cold air beyond the blanket. You rise into stiffness, but not surprise. The body expects it. The shoulders remember before thought arrives. Your feet find the floor. Clothes are pulled on, practical and familiar. The cloth smells faintly of smoke, even when aired. The boots are still hard at the creases where yesterday's mud dried into ridges. A quick meal or drink begins the day. Just enough warmth to place in the stomach before the field takes over. The cup may be chipped. The bread may be from yesterday. The light in the room is grey rather than golden, and faces are quieter in it. You step outside, and the cool air touches the washed skin of your hands. It will not stay clean long. That is understood, and there is a kind of peace in not pretending otherwise. The path toward the landing is damp and narrow. Grass brushes your boots, leaving beads of water on the leather. The sky is low, but not threatening yet. A thin wind comes across the channels. It smells of reed, mud, and distant smoke, the common breath of the Utrecht Peat country. We walk with you again, not as watchers from far away, but as a quiet presence beside your shoulder, keeping pace with the start of another working day. At the boat, you pause to look into the water. The surface is dark and smooth except where small insects have made tiny rings. Your rope is wet, the knot swollen, but still obedient. You untie it with fingers that are not fully warm. The punt shifts when freed, eager in the slight current or breeze. You step down carefully, feeling the board dip under your weight, and take up the pole that waits along the side. The first push is always a small awakening. The pole meets bottom, and the body remembers balance. You lean. The boat glides. Reeds slide past the gunwale with a whisper. Drops from their tips fall into the channel after you disturb them. The world is not fully bright, but the route is known. In the dimness, the familiar shape seems softened, yet your hands and knees know where caution is needed. On this morning, the first task is not dredging but checking the older stacks after the damp night. You guide the punt to the legacker and step out. The ground takes your boot with a soft press. The rows of standing turf look darker than they did at sunset, but the air is moving, and that is helpful. You touch a block at the top of one row. It is cool outside, firmer inside, and not worse for the night. A stack near the center has held well. You press the side with your palm and feel it settle, but not slump. Another stack, lower and closer to the water, needs opening. The damp has crept into one side. You remove the outer turves and set them apart, making a rough fan so the wind can pass through. The sound is gentle, a dry scrape giving way to a wetter thud where the inner pieces have held moisture. This work is patient salvage, not failure. Every peat season includes such adjustments. A stack rebuilt today may dry cleanly by the end of the week. A row darkened by dew may lighten by afternoon. The skill lies in responding without discouragement. We can feel how the job trains a person to accept change at the scale of weather and material. Not with grand words, but with practical hands and a steady eye. The Utrecht Peat Bagger often lives close to uncertainty, yet the uncertainty is made bearable by routine. The first round of inspection, the decision about dredging, the choice of which rows to turn, the small repair at the bank, the cleaning of drainage runs. Each part gives the morning a set of handles. You take hold of them one by one, and the day becomes something that can be carried. By mid-morning, the wind improves, and you begin turning the row that stood through the night. The peat blocks are lighter now. They make a rough, dry sound when moved. Your fingers pinch the top edge, lift, rotate, and set each one with its damp side outward. The row changes color as you work, darker faces turning toward the air. It is slow, exact, and strangely satisfying, like opening shutters on a long, low room. The sun has not fully broken through, but brightness gathers behind the cloud. That is enough. Drying does not require a perfect day. It asks for movement of air, time, and care. You learn to value middling weather, days that neither soak nor scorch. A gentle wind can do more honest work than a blazing noon that cracks the surface too fast. The peat, like a person, seems to prefer being handled gradually. There are places where the old peat cuttings have left wide water, and places where the strips of land are so thin that they seem drawn with a ruler. From your field you can see how human need has shaped the landscape. Generations dug fuel, widened channels, left drying strips, repaired edges, and moved by boat where carts could not go. The country is not wilderness, and not exactly town. It is a working in-between. A historian might later call it an extracted landscape, a wet industrial countryside, or part of the fuel economy of the Netherlands. You would not need such phrases while your hands are full of turf. You know it as the place where the boat sits, where the bank crumbles, where the good peat lies deeper, where the wind reaches first, and where a person can earn something if the season does not turn against him. Knowledge does not have to sound scholarly to be precise. Now and then, Someone comes along the channel and offers news. A buyer is expected near the larger canal. A road is poor after rain. A neighbor's child is ill. A boat needs repair. Such news passes from mouth to mouth, while poles rest against shoulders and boats drift slightly in place. You answer, listen, and return to the row. The conversation leaves faint ripples, like a stone dropped into water. Then the work closes over it. Near noon, you begin loading a smaller batch of dry turf for local use. These pieces have been stacked long enough to travel a short way. They are not the largest or finest, but they will burn well enough. You carry them from the stack to the punt in armfuls, feeling the edges press through your sleeves. A little dust rises with each lift. It smells warm, old, and faintly bitter, the scent of summer stored in fuel. The boat takes shape around the cargo. First the bottom layer, placed flat and tight, then another row, crossing slightly for stability. You keep the center of weight low. You leave a place for your feet. You tie nothing yet, because the load is modest and the route sheltered. Still, you watch the balance. A boatman who ignores balance soon learns from wet clothes, spoiled cargo, and the amused silence of people who saw the mistake coming. This load may be meant for a household nearby, a workshop, or a small trader who buys what can be spared. The counting is done quietly. So many pieces in a row, so many rows, with broken pieces noted or set aside. You may mark the count in chalk, in memory, or through agreed measure. Much of this commerce depends on trust, habit, and the fact that everyone expects to meet again along the same water. When you push off with the load, the boat rides lower and responds more slowly. The pole presses into the bottom, and you feel the work travel through your whole frame. The cargo smells dry against the wet smell of the channel. It is odd to carry dryness over water, but that is the trade. Dry fuel, wet road, solid cargo, floating path. The low country makes such opposites ordinary. The route takes you along a channel bordered by reeds and rough grass, then past a few cottages with small gardens. At one place, a woman is rinsing something at the bank, her sleeves rolled, the water dark around her hands. At another, a boy watches your boat pass and counts the stacked turves with his eyes. You nod. He nods back. Work is one of the languages children learn before they know they are learning it. At the delivery place, you bring the punt alongside and hold it steady with the pole. The bank is higher here, reinforced with boards that have warped from weather. Someone helps unload, or you climb out and do it yourself, passing the turves to a storage place under cover. The blocks knock together in a dry rhythm. Dust flecks the air. A few crumbs fall and are swept aside. The work is lighter than wet dredging, but it still asks for repetition. Payment or account may be handled later, or noted now in a small way. A spoken agreement, a tally, a mark, a promise. In working communities, money often moves with delays, favors, obligations, and memory. That can soften hardship when neighbors are fair, or deepen it when times are tight. You accept the terms because the day has other needs. The field is waiting, and the empty boat is ready to return. The trip back feels easier. The boat rides high, and the pole strokes lengthen. Sun appears for a brief time, bright enough to warm the side of your face and throw clean shadows from the reeds. The water shows the sky in broken pieces. You pass the place where the channel widens, and a breeze crosses it with a small roughness. The empty punt lifts over each ripple, light after its load. Back at the Legaker, the afternoon asks for dredging again. The demand for fresh peat has not gone away just because you delivered older fuel. You take up the baggerbogle, step into the punt, and move to the open cut. The tool lowers through the surface. Cold rises from the water. The long handle settles against your body. You draw the scoop through the submerged peat and feel the weight gather like a slow answer. A full scoop breaks the surface dark and shining. Water pours from it, but never enough. You swing it into the boat and empty it with a twist that pulls at the shoulders. Again, again, again. The motion is old by now in this script of the day, but in life it never becomes merely decorative. Every pull has weight. Every pull asks balance. Every pull brings the deep, waterlogged material into light. You begin to notice the subtle differences between places in the cut. Near one edge, the peat is more fibrous, and the scoop drags through roots. Near another, it is finer and heavier, almost greasy in the way it slides. Some layers have more silt, which lowers the quality. Some hold together well, and will make better turf if dried properly. The field may look uniform from afar, but under the water, it has layers. A Utrecht Peat Bagger learns these hidden variations through labor rather than reading. The pole tells you depth. The scoop tells you texture. The boat tells you weight. Your arms tell you when the material is too watery. Your nose may even tell you something, because fresher disturbed peat, older sour mud, and reed-filled sludge each carry a different smell. The work is physical, but it is also a long education in attention. The sun disappears again behind cloud, and the afternoon becomes cooler. This is not unwelcome during dredging. Heat can be heavy in a wet landscape, especially when insects rise and the air stands still. A cooler sky lets the body continue. Your breath steadies with the pull of the scoop. The boat slowly fills. The dark mound in the bottom spreads, glistening and settling, while thin water runs around your boots. When enough has been raised, you pole back to the field and unload. The fresh peat falls beside the morning spread, and you use the shovel to extend the bed. It is heavier now because you are tired. Tools do not change weight, but the body does. You adjust by taking slightly smaller shovelfuls, by turning from the hips rather than twisting too sharply, by letting the rhythm protect you. Old workers know that endurance is often a matter of measure. The new strip is spread with the rake. You draw the teeth through the wet surface and hear a thick whisper. You smooth with the board. You fill a hollow. You press a high ridge lower. The field becomes orderly under your hands, even though the material began as a heap of soaked darkness. This transformation is one of the quiet satisfactions of the work, and it arrives without applause, without announcement, with only the dark shine of an even surface. A few reeds have fallen into the spread. You pick them out before they become trouble in cutting. A small stone or bit of wood appears under the rake, and you toss it aside. The peat bed must be as even as the material allows, because later the knife will find every flaw. You learn to correct problems early, when correction is easy. Later, the same flaw may become a broken turf, a wasted piece, or a complaint from a buyer. The afternoon deepens. Your clothes carry several kinds of damp now: morning mist, rain from yesterday, sweat, and water thrown from the scoop. The body stops distinguishing them. Damp is simply the condition of the day. Your hands grip, release, grip again. The skin at the base of the fingers has softened despite calluses, and the pole's friction is beginning to make itself known. You shift your hold slightly and continue. We can linger on that physical truth because it explains the phrase in the title, why it was hard to be a 1910s Utrecht Peat Bagger. It was hard in the obvious ways, with weight, cold, wet ground, and long hours. It was also hard in quieter ways, through uncertainty, repetition, fragile timing, and the need to keep judgment alive when the body wanted to become only tired. The difficulty was woven through ordinary motions, not saved for dramatic moments. A cart arrives near the higher path late in the afternoon, perhaps to take dried turf where water cannot easily go, or to bring supplies to a household near the field. The horse stands patiently, head low, tail moving now and then. Its harness smells of leather, sweat, and rain. The cart boards creak as something is shifted. You hear the sound while smoothing the peat bed, and for a moment The land road and water road meet in the same working place. The cart driver speaks with someone near the shed, and the conversation carries only in pieces. Weather, price, tomorrow, a name, a laugh, brief and low, not loud enough to disturb the field. Then the cart moves on, wheels making a damp crunch in the track. The horse's hooves fade. You continue raking, but the sound remains in memory for a minute, another thread in the day's fabric. Toward evening, the fresh spread is finished. You stand at one end and look along its length. The surface is not perfectly smooth, because peat never behaves like plaster or clay, but it is good enough and even enough. The edges are clean. The thickness is right by eye. It will need time before cutting. You step back carefully, placing your boots where old ground can take them, and feel a small inward nod of satisfaction. There are older turfs to stack before you leave. The wind has dried one row faster than expected, and if left flat too long, the pieces may warp or crumble at the edges. You gather them gently and build a low stack, leaving spaces for air. The first course goes down, the second crosses, the third rises. Your hands find the pattern. The stack becomes stable, a little house made of fuel, ready to breathe through the night. The light turns amber under the cloud edge. It touches the tops of the stacks and the wet shine of the new peat. So the field holds 2 times at once, the dryness of earlier labor and the rawness of what you raise today. This is common in peat work. Every stage lies beside another, past effort, present effort, future effort. A single glance across the legaca shows yesterday, today, and tomorrow arranged in rows. You clean the tools as the light lowers. The rake first, because peat packed between the teeth will dry hard. Then the shovel, scraping the blade along grass, rinsing it in the channel, wiping the handle where your hands will find it at dawn. The baggerbogle is last, dragged from the punt and washed with slow swings. The scoop sheds dark water. Strands of root cling and release. Drops fall from the rim, each one catching a little of the fading sky. Another worker calls good evening from across the channel. You answer in the same low tone. The words are plain, but after a day of mostly tool sounds, they carry warmth. People who share a landscape of labor may not need many words to recognize each other's fatigue. A nod across water can hold understanding. A short call can say that the day has been long, that the weather held enough, and that tomorrow will find you both again. You tie the boat, then untie it once more, because you notice the angle is wrong and a night wind might rub the side against a rough post. This is the kind of small care that comes from experience. A tired beginner might leave it. You do not. You shift the rope, set the punt a little freer, and test the distance. The boat moves in a small arc and settles without touching the worst edge. That will do. The walk home in the evening has become familiar to us now, but it still changes with the day's weather. Tonight the path is less muddy than it was after rain, and the grass holds a dry edge where the wind reached it. The smell of smoke begins earlier, because houses are cooling. A child calls from somewhere out of sight. A door closes. The water along the channel reflects a sky that is neither day nor night yet. At home, the same practical welcome waits. And yet each evening feels slightly different, because each day has spent you differently. You set down your things. You remove boots with a little effort, because damp leather holds the foot. You wash, watching the basin darken again. The skin around your nails looks permanently shadowed. The towel is rough but dry. Warmth from the stove reaches the wet cloth at your knees and begins to loosen it. This evening, perhaps, there is talk of a larger delivery in a few days if the weather holds. That means more stacking, more sorting, and careful loading. It may mean rising earlier or working later. You listen, answer, and picture the field. Which stacks will be ready? Which rows need turning? Which boat can carry the load? A peat bagger's planning is done in images of place, because every decision has a bank, a row, a pile, and a route attached to it. The household settles after the meal, but your mind stays near the larger delivery. A good shipment can matter. It can settle an account, buy supplies, or justify the labor of a difficult week. Yet it depends on weather that cannot be ordered and material that cannot be hurried. This is the old tension of peat work, effort pressed against patience. You can work hard, but you cannot force drying beyond its own pace. Before sleep, you step outside for a moment. The air is cool and still. The stars, if the clouds have opened, appear above the lowland with unusual clarity because there are few bright lamps out here. The water beside the landing holds a darker copy of the sky. The boat lies quiet. From nearby houses comes the smell of turf fires, each one burning down at its own pace, making small islands of warmth in the wet country. You stand there without needing to speak. The day has been made of material things, and the night is material too. Cold air on the face, damp boards underfoot, smoke in the nose, wool at the wrists. This kind of life does not separate thought from touch very easily. What you know because your hands have met it. What you fear because the sky can change. What comforts you can usually hold. When you go back inside, the lamp is lower. The room has the soft disorder of use, cups set aside, tools near a chair, cloth drying, boots by the door. Nothing looks arranged for a visitor. It is arranged for living. You lie down with the field still faintly present in the body, and sleep comes in layers, first to the legs, then the arms, then the thoughts that had been counting rows in the dark. The next day begins with clearer weather, and the larger delivery moves closer from possibility into task. You wake before the sun has fully reached the windows. The air has a dry edge, a hopeful thing in peat country. Outside, the reeds move in a light wind from the right direction. You notice that before breakfast, perhaps even before speech, weather is the first news. Everything else follows. At the field, the stacks meant for delivery are inspected closely. You pull a turf from the side and break it. The inside is dry enough, with no dark wet heart. It snaps with a rough sound rather than bending. Dust rises from the break. You smell it, and it carries the warm, earthy scent of good fuel. This is a favorable sign, not a celebration, only a sign, and signs are how the peat worker proceeds. Sorting begins. Better pieces go to the delivery stack. Broken or damp pieces are separated. Those with too much crumbling may still be used locally or dried longer. You handle each block quickly, but not carelessly, because quality matters now. The hands move from stack to pile, pile to boat, boat to count. The rhythm is faster than turning rows, but still steady. You feel the dry scrape at your palms, different from the wet pull of dredging. A larger boat comes nearer the field, either yours for the day or hired with its carrier. Its boards are broader, its sides higher, and it carries the smell of old cargo. Peat dust lies in seams from previous loads. Rope marks show along the gunwale. The boatman, if another person handles it, watches the bank and says little. Work begins with positioning, because loading badly placed cargo wastes strength before the first turf is lifted. You form a line of movement from stack to boat. Perhaps another worker helps. Perhaps a family member passes pieces from the pile. The blocks move in armfuls, dry and rasping. They are lighter than wet peat, but their number makes them endless. Into the boat they go, course after course, with the flattest pieces along the sides and more irregular ones tucked where they will not shift. The cargo rises in a brown wall, counting threads through the loading. One stack, then another, a tally spoken softly, a mark made, a correction when broken pieces are set aside. You keep the count in the mind while the arms keep moving, which is harder than it sounds when dust catches in the throat and the body has settled into repetition. Losing count means starting again, or trusting someone else's memory. So you hold the number carefully, like a small tool. The sun warms the dry turf and brings out its smell strongly. It is no longer the sour smell of fresh dredged peat. It is warmer, more brittle, with something like old leaves and hearth ash in it. Dust clings to your lips. You drink when you can, but not often enough to break the line of work. The larger delivery has its own pressure, not urgent in a dramatic way, but steady, because a boat waiting costs time. A 1910s Utrecht Peat Bagger may rarely see the full journey of every load, but today you go with it part of the way. The boat sits low when ready, its cargo secured with ropes and perhaps boards or mats to keep the top from spilling. You step aboard or walk alongside at the first stretch, depending on the route. The water accepts the weight slowly. The boat's movement is more solemn now, deeper and less easily turned. The push from the pole is heavier than with the punt. You feel the bottom through the long wood and lean into it with care. Too hard, and the pole may slip. Too shallow, and the boat barely moves. The boatman may take the stern while you guide from another place, or you may help from the bank with a line where the channel narrows. Water transport looks peaceful from a distance, but close up it is work of balance and timing. The loaded boat passes the drying fields, the cottages, the willow posts, and the low bridge where everyone lowers their head. The cargo smells dry behind you. The channel smells wet ahead of you. Reeds brush the side with a long scratch. At a bend, the boat's weight wants to continue straight, and you correct it with pole and patience. A small mistake here would not be dramatic, but it would be troublesome, and trouble is enough. On wider water, the movement becomes smoother, though the load still asks respect. The boat leaves a deeper wake. Other craft give space. You can see more of the sky here, and perhaps a church tower in the distance, pale above roofs and trees. The route toward Utrecht or a local yard feels like a line between worlds, from marsh field to storage place, from the work of drying to the work of selling and burning. At a yard, the smell changes. There is peat, but also coal, wood, horse manure, canal water, oil, and the sour damp of old sacks. Men speak more quickly here than in the fields. Goods arrive and leave. Measures are checked. A scale may stand under shelter. Stacks of fuel make dark walls. You step from the boat onto firmer ground and feel, as always, that land after water is both welcome and oddly rigid. Unloading begins, and the direction of the labor reverses. Turf that moved from stack to boat now moves from boat to yard. The blocks are passed, carried, stacked, counted again. Your arms, already tired from loading, repeat the motion in reverse. The buyer or yardman watches quality. Perhaps he says the load is good. Perhaps he says little, which may mean the same thing. The best trades often pass without much speech. If there is weighing, measuring, or tallying, you wait with practical patience. The air in the yard feels busier than the marsh. Wheels pass. A horse stamps. Someone laughs sharply, then returns to business. A coal sack thuds nearby, heavier and darker in another way than peat. The smell of coal is sharper, mineral, and sooty. It reminds you again that peat is not the only fuel in the world, and not the strongest competitor in the market. That knowledge sits quietly in the background. The peat load has arrived. It will be sold or stored. Some of it may warm rooms in Utrecht where no one has seen the legaca. Some may be bought because it is familiar, because it burns the way a household expects, because it costs what the buyer can manage. The city takes the work in, without needing to understand every step that brought it there. When the delivery is settled, the empty or lighter boat waits for the return. The yard has left dust on your clothes, different from field dust, mixed with road dirt and coal soot. You drink water, or weak coffee if it is available, tasting the grit at the edge of the cup. Then the route turns back toward the wetland. The city or yard sounds recede behind you, and the open channels receive the boat again. The return journey feels lighter in every sense. Less cargo, less counting, less attention from buyers. The boat responds more easily. The pole strokes lengthen. We pass again into the quieter water country, where reeds replace yard walls and the smell of wet earth overtakes coal. Your body is tired, but your mind loosens because one task has been completed. The delivery has left your hands. The field still waits, but this part is done. Back at the Legerker, the absence of those stacks is visible. Empty ground shows where the delivery was built. You sweep fragments aside and gather usable pieces. The field looks both poorer and cleaner, like a shelf after goods have been taken down. There is room now for new drying, new stacks, new labor. Peat work is cyclical in that practical way. Space emptied by finished fuel becomes space for wet material, not yet ready. The afternoon is shorter because of the delivery, but it still has demands. You check the new peat bed, now slightly firm at the surface. You touch it with the back of your fingers, a gentle test. Not yet. Another day, perhaps more, depending on the wind. You turn older rows instead, working steadily while the delivery fatigue settles into the muscles. There is no anger in it, only the knowledge that one kind of work does not excuse the next. A quiet pride may come with the larger delivery, though it is not shown broadly. Pride, in this place, is more likely to appear as a careful glance at the field, a slight straightening of the shoulders, or a comment that the load went well. The peat has left in good condition. The count was accepted. The boat travelled without trouble. Such things matter. They are the small successes from which a working season is built. Evening falls again, and with it the familiar tasks return. Tools cleaned, boat tied, stacks checked, the field walked once more. Your tiredness tonight is deeper because loading and unloading have used the body differently from dredging and turning. The arms feel hollow in their strength. The legs are heavy from balancing on boat boards and yard ground. Your hands are dry and scraped from finished turf rather than softened by wet peat. At home, the stove feels especially welcome. The warmth comes through the room slowly, and you sit closer than usual. Dust from the delivery has settled in your hair and at the collar. Washing clears some of it, but not all. The basin darkens with a browner cloud than on a dredging day. You rub your palms and feel where dry turf edges made shallow lines. They are not serious. They are simply the day's handwriting on the skin. Talk of the delivery continues around the table. How the yard received it, whether the count was fair, whether another load might be ready soon. The household listens because the field's success belongs to more than one person. A season is pieced together from such loads. Some weeks give enough, some do not. Tonight, there is at least the steadiness of having moved one batch from land to buyer, from waiting to account. After the meal, you sit with less work in your hands. There is still mending to do, always, but perhaps not tonight. The larger delivery has taken the edge from everyone. The room grows quiet sooner. The lamp seems softer. Outside, the water is nearly still. The stove burns with a deeper red, and each turf inside it gives way slowly, making heat from a substance that began, long ago, as moss and reed under a wet sky. We can follow that thought gently, without turning away from the room. The fuel burning beside you was made by time first, then labor. Centuries made the peat. Workers made the turf. Weather finished it. Trade moved it. Fire releases it. A peat bagger lives near this long chain without needing to name its full length. You know only that warmth comes from work, and that tomorrow the work will begin again in the damp light. The next morning, the field carries signs of the delivery day. The empty stack place is still clear. The boat boards show fresh scrapes. Your arms are slower to wake, yet the peat bed laid earlier has firmed at the surface, and now cutting can begin. You kneel near one edge with the knife and test the material. It holds, not perfectly, but enough. The blade sinks in and leaves a dark, clean line behind it. Cutting a new peat bed is a careful pleasure. The wet shine has dulled. The surface gives under pressure but keeps its edge. You mark long lines first, steady and parallel, then cross lines to form blocks. The grid appears slowly, as if hidden order is being brought out of the dark material. Your hand must keep the spacing even. Too wide, and the blocks dry poorly. Too narrow, and they break before stacking. The blade makes a dense whisper. Your breath settles with it, line after line. Turn, line after line. The field under your knees is cold, but the morning sun rests lightly on your back. We can feel the contrast, damp below and warmth above, the common condition of peat work. You belong to both at once. Your hands are in old wet earth, and your shoulders are under the new day. A younger helper may watch the spacing, learning how the grid is set. You show by doing more than explaining. The knife angle, the pressure, the way the wrist follows the line. When you do speak, the words are simple, not so deep. Keep it straight, leave that corner. Such instruction does not sound grand, but it carries the trade forward. Someone once said the same kind of thing to you. Once cut, the blocks must rest before lifting, and that waiting may feel like restraint after the satisfaction of marking the bed. You move away to older rows, letting the new cuts settle. This is another recurring lesson. Each task opens the next, but rarely at once. The field is a place of intervals. Raise the peat, spread it, wait, cut it, wait, turn it, wait, stack it, wait, load it. The work is active, but its heart is patient. By midday, the newly cut blocks have firmed enough at the surface to touch but not lift. You test one corner and leave it. That is good judgment, though it feels like doing less. Instead, you dredge another load, because the season must keep moving. The scoop lowers again into the channel, and the heavy pull returns after the finer work of cutting. Your body shifts from delicate pressure to full weight, from knife to pole, from line to load. This shift between tasks keeps the day from becoming simple, even when each action repeats. The peat bagger must be strong, patient, observant, and adaptable, sometimes all before noon. A wet field asks for one kind of care. A dry stack asks for another. A boat asks for balance. A buyer asks for count and quality. A tool asks for maintenance. The body may be one body, but the work uses it in many ways. The dredged peat is darker than yesterday's, perhaps from a slightly different layer. It comes up with more root, and you spend extra time pulling the strands free before spreading. The roots are pale against the black mass, slick and stubborn, smelling strongly of the old marsh. You toss them aside to dry or rot where they will not spoil the bed. The scoop goes down again. The boat fills, and the day moves forward. Afternoon brings a warmth that makes the wet ground smell strong. The air near the new spread feels close, almost thick. You drink more often, wipe your face, and keep the pace measured. There is no honor in exhausting yourself before the necessary tasks are done. Experienced labor is not simply enduring pain. It is distributing effort across the day, leaving enough strength for the last check, the last knot, and the walk home. A cloud of insects rises from the bank when you disturb a patch of grass. They glint briefly in the sun, then scatter. The reeds make a low sound as wind passes through them. In the distance, a boat horn or call carries from a wider canal, softened by space. The working world is all around you, yet none of it breaks the slow center of the field. You rake, smooth, lift, and turn inside that center. As the day leans toward evening, the newly cut bed is checked once more. The lines hold. The blocks have not slumped badly. That is enough for now. Tomorrow, or the next day, they may be lifted to edge. You resist touching them too soon. The temptation is always there, especially when the weather looks promising. But rushing peat can waste more time than waiting. The field teaches this lesson, until the hands accept it. You finish by building a small protective edge, where water might run if night rain comes. A few strokes with the rake, a low ridge, a cleared channel. Such work may or may not be needed, but it costs little now and may save trouble later. The sky is uncertain, with light clouds moving from the west. You look at them, then at the field, then at the clouds again. The conversation between worker and weather continues without words. Tools return to their places. The boat is tied. The new spread lies dark and smooth beside the cut bed, while older turfs stand in rows like low, patient markers of earlier days. The field holds many stages at once, and you have touched almost all of them since morning. That is why the work feels long, not only because the hours pass, but because one day contains so many versions of peat, from underwater darkness to fuel nearly ready for fire. On the way home, the evening smells of drying grass and distant rain. Your steps are slow, but not defeated. The work has entered the body deeply enough that walking feels like another tool motion, steady and familiar. The house lights appear. Smoke rises. Water reflects the sky in dim strips. We keep walking beside you, letting the script move at the pace of tired boots, because this is where the day becomes quiet enough for sleep to begin gathering at the edges. Inside, the room receives you with its low stove glow and the familiar smell of peat smoke, wool, bread, and damp leather warming by the door. You wash the dark from your hands as well as hands can be washed after a day in the Utrecht peat fields, and the water in the basin clouds softly, like a little piece of marsh brought indoors. The deepest lines remain at your knuckles, but they no longer ask anything of you tonight. They can keep their shadows until morning. You sit near the stove, and the heat finds your fingers one by one. A turf settles in the fire with a small inward sound, giving back the warmth that was once hidden under water, under reeds, under years of quiet pressure. The room is dim now, and our voice can be dim with it, because the work has done what it can do for one day. Outside, the boat rests against its rope, the pole lies still, and the legaca holds its rose in the dark. There is no hurry left in the house. The table is cleared. The lamp burns low. Your boots stand near the threshold with mud drying at their seams, and the tools wait out by the water, rinsed and leaned where morning will find them. The peat blocks on the field are cooling under the night air, losing a little moisture, keeping a little damp, continuing their slow change without needing your hands. You let your shoulders drop, and the day's weight loosens by degrees. The wet pull of the scoop, the dry rasp of turf, the reed smell, the canal water, the quiet counting of blocks, all of it softens until it is only a rhythm somewhere far behind you. The stove gives a steady red light. The room holds still around it. Outside, the Utrecht marsh lies dark and low, with the narrow boat tied fast, the drying rose breathing in the night, and the long-handled scoop at rest beside the silent water.